All right, let's do this, people. What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Derek O'Shea Show. I'm going to do my podcast first. Hope you guys are doing well. I am currently live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook as we speak. Start off with today's quote by Tom Clancy. The control of information is something the elites always does, particularly in a despotic form of government. Information, knowledge is power. If you can control information, you can control the people. Now let's talk about Joe Rogan! Welcome to the Derek O'Shea Show, where we discuss culture, news, politics, and more. Sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the show. Be sure to tell your friends and family about the revolution. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Derek O'Shea Show. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to hang out with me. It means a lot to me. If you don't mind sharing this with all your friends and family, put it on all social media platforms. I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you would like to support my show, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Derek O'Shea Show. Buymeacoffee.com/Derek O'Shea Show. I'd greatly appreciate it. It helps pay for servers and stuff that I use for the podcast to continue to go. If you believe in free speech, if you believe in having a voice over, our big tech overlords and corporate media, then support the show. It means a lot to me that people that do. Let's get into the news. Nearly 300 doctors and scientists sign an open letter to Spotify calling for it to stop Joe Rogan from spreading anti-vax misinformation after he hosted virologist. Oh, not just crazy man that's coming up with stupid stuff on his own. He's a virologist who called vaccination program a mass formation psychosis. Dr. Robert freaking Malone. Wait, he's a doctor? So a bunch of scientists and doctors got together and wanted to shut down the ideas of a doctor. And a big reason was a mass formation psychosis. It's almost like it's too ironic to even joke about. I can't imagine why doctors would sign a petition letter to stop the spread of information. I thought science was that we don't all know everything there is to know about, everything. So the idea of science is because we don't know something, we want to learn something. And so when we don't agree with something or we're trying to debunk something, we use science to do it, not signing an open letter and using a very political way to go about and shutting down information. Whether you agree with the information or not is another thing. But this is the most ironic thing I've ever seen in my life. But this is the culture in which we live today. You're not allowed to critique people. You're not allowed to have a conversation. You're not allowed to have a different opinion. If you have a different opinion, you need to shut your freaking mouth. And we're going to sign a letter, and we're going to ruin your life, and we're going to shut you down forever because you have a different opinion than me. And I'm too insecure to argue myself or out of that way in which I believe. I'm just going to tell you you're a bigot, a homophobe, or a racist, or you're spreading misinformation. But that's the culture we live in today, right? When we actually have to do work and figure out why we believe what we believe or argue against it, and when someone puts us in a corner that disagrees with us, and that's actually pretty, formidable, like a Dr. freaking Robert Malone coming from a good university. He's not coming from the tech school down the street and is telling you like this weird video being passed around by this pastor saying, God gave us everything we need. You just got to drink your pee. And it cures COVID. That is the craziest thing I've ever seen. But that video is being passed around because, we allow freedom of speech to be passed around. There wasn't a part of me in any part of my bone when I saw that video being passed around, that pastor saying that you should drink your pee. I never thought while listening to it, watching it, thinking, maybe the guy has a point. I am going to start drinking my pee right now. No, we need to get back to a society that allows crazies and actual crazies to have a voice. I don't care if you're a piece of trash human being, racist crap hole. You should be allowed to have a voice. Why? Because I want to know that you're that way. So A, I can stay away from you, or maybe have a conversation or maybe a debate of why you believe what you believe. And so maybe I can learn something and maybe you can learn something and maybe you can change or maybe I can change, because that's what freedom of ideas and speech is about. Because the idea of freedom of speech is that we don't all know there is to know in the world. And it's important to allow people to have the freedom to ask why. But no, we're in a society today where instead of having that conversation or pushing back, you and I need to sign a letter to just tell people to shut their freaking mouth. And the whole reason why people listen to Joe Rogan is because Joe Rogan allows the guests to dictate where the podcast goes, whether information is passed or not. And he also pushes back sometimes on some of the crazier things, but he allows people like an actual doctor to have a voice, where people like these 300 doctors, scientists, 270 experts, whatever. I've seen 270, I've seen the 300. They don't want those voices. I can't imagine a profession that is about science. We don't know everything there is to know about the human body yet. We don't know how to cure cancer, apparently. There's a lot of stuff about the human body we do not know. And yet these scientists, these doctors, have the audacity to sign a petition to get someone that allows some of the doctors with dissenting opinions. I love that the fact that there's such thing as dissenting opinions. It used to be in science you were praised for having bold ideas, bold questions, because then that meant we would grow as a population. There's a part in the article that I really like. It says, now hundreds of medical professionals have fact-checked Malone and demanded accountability from Spotify. Who's the fact checker? Huh? Hundreds of medical professionals? Did they help create the vaccine? Who gives the authority to these fact checkers? You see these fact checkers all the time on places like YouTube and Twitter, who are just, people like me working customer service and all of a sudden became a fact checker. I am the fact checker. Could you imagine if I was the fact checker of everything? Who wants that responsibility? Only people with political motives want that responsibility. Because someone like me would be like, I don't want to be in charge of fact checkers. What if I'm freaking wrong? I'd rather have crazy ideas out there than shutting ideas down. It's just like when Joe Rogan got COVID and then, a few days later he felt fine. And instead of people going, maybe we should try the protocol, in which a lot of doctors, the critical care doctors, are doing, and then follow what Joe Rogan has done, maybe we can save people's lives. But instead of asking if we can save people's lives, it's the same narrative always. So when Dr. Malone says mass formation psychosis, and then a bunch of doctors come out and tell him to shut up, only a sane person with logic in their brain can stop and think and go, wait a minute. This doesn't make sense. It's getting out of hand. It's getting over the top. But you can continue to try to shut down Joe Rogan, and he doesn't care. The reason I know YouTube and Twitter and stuff, they feel a responsibility to squash crazy ideas, and they don't want crazy people going on their platform and blaming their platform for whatever. But the reason Joe Rogan is so popular and more popular than any podcast out there, even if he switched to Spotify, which wasn't the most popular platform, and I'm sure there was a growth period, is because he allows freedom of speech on his platform. And he has so much money that he doesn't care what he talks about. And that's the kind of person you want running a podcast like that, because he has an attitude of teach me something. I'm here to learn from you. Honestly, I watch a lot of live podcasts where these prominent YouTubers have these hosts that come on, these kids that come on. They're young, and it seems like they bring guests on for their guests to learn something about them, as opposed to like Joe Rogan, who says, you know what? I'm an idiot. I'm a comic. The smarter people in my life are the people that ask questions, not the people that have answers. And my encouragement to you is to not be like these fact checkers, these scientists, is to actually ask more questions in your life, because when you ask questions, you gain in knowledge. If you just walk around acting like you know everything, you don't. The people that know very little in my life are the people that walk around acting like they know everything. The people that ask why. Why is this? You can always tell a smart person by how well their question is formed over how well that statement was articulated. Because if you can ask a deep question, you know more about that information than the person usually talking about the information. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm happy to be wrong because I don't care. Let me know your thoughts on this. There's so much irony in this article. It's almost unbearable. But this is the world in which we live. Is that we have doctors, scientists, quote unquote experts in a field that no one is an expert in. Because no one completely knows everything there is to know about the human body. Also, how we react to every single medication out there. That's why you see drugs that are created that get taken down from the FDA all the time. But, this is the world we're in. Can you imagine if I just went out and said everything, like, this is what space is, and I know everything there is. And you're like, we don't even know what's at the bottom of the deepest part of our ocean, and you want to talk about that? God, science, when are you going to grow a backbone? When are you going to have some courage to just go, we don't know, and then to ask more questions than worry about misinformation being spread, instead of just debunk that misinformation. Say what's wrong about it. Talk about what's wrong about it, and then you won't. If a scientist just goes out and says, this is what's wrong about what Dr. Malone said, and this is how he's wrong, and left it at that, it would have way more power than signing a letter saying, you need to stop this information. It just makes people like me go, why? Because he's saying something that might hurt your thesis or your hypothesis. Let me know your thoughts. I appreciate you guys so much. If you don't mind sharing this with your friends and family, let them know about the Derek O'Shea Show. Greatly appreciate it. It's the news with some encouragement to you, and hopefully you will be more willing to ask more questions in your life, because we have a generation of people that just are know-it-alls. We're all know-it-alls. We all have Google. We all have DuckDuckGo, and we don't ask people for information anymore. We just look it up. So now we know everything there is to know. But this is the generation we're in. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm live right now. This is a live show. If you're not on YouTube, you can follow me on YouTube. I'm also on Rumble. I'm on Odyssey. I'm on Twitch. See how long that lasts. Twitter. Same with YouTube, though. I hope you guys have a freaking fantastic day. And share this news with your friends and family. It means a lot to me. And again, I'm live, so hang out with me afterwards. We're going to hang out and talk about this. I just think it's crazy what's going on. Imagine being a serious academic, and instead of, saying what's wrong with what the doctor's talking about and using, science and information and studies, instead just telling him to shut up. I worry about our future so much because of stuff like this. It's just like these politicians that talk about what the Federal Reserve does to our dollar, and people are like, no, it's actually a good thing. Have a great day. If you're done watching me, but I'm going live. I'm going to hang out on YouTube a little bit longer, so hang out with me. I'm just going to get some water real quick. Also, I have a huge announcement. If you've made it to the end of this show, live shows every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern is a new thing I'm going to start doing, because I need a day in which I can go live and hang out with you. Sundays, 8 p.m. Eastern. If you can't hang out with us, watch the show later. But I have somebody joining me, so it's just not me staring at the computer talking to myself. So come hang out with me, though, and we'll talk about the news. We'll talk about the week. We'll talk about whatever comes to mind, and be a part of the community. It means a lot to me. I hope you have a great day. If you're on YouTube, hang out. If you're not, goodbye. What's up, guys? We're going to watch the press conference as soon as it gets started, whenever that happens. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Joe Rogan and the scientists. I don't understand how you could be taken seriously as a scientist writing a political letter, as opposed to just, being a serious scientist and just like debunking another scientist's claims with, facts and stuff like that. But get in the chat. Let me know how you're doing, how you're feeling. I hope you guys are all doing well. I'm going to watch this press conference a little bit just to see if there's anything worth talking about or watching. You never know with these press conferences. It could be fire. The Supreme Court vaccine mandates just got shut down. And it's just breaking news, so I'm sure this press conference might be a little fiery, if you get my drift. Also, this show is brought to you by Derek O'Shea's Coffee. I roast my own coffee. Hope you guys are doing well. You never know with these, how...
You're here, Steve. That's all that matters.
It's so quiet in there. I'm going to zoom in. I don't like... I'm a big fan of sign language, but... she's distracting. What has everyone thought about what's going on with the Supreme Court? Curious. Again, if I answer your question, if I don't answer a question of yours.
Okay, we have another
because I'm
special
live
guest
on-
today, our National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, who will give us some brief opening comments. We'll take some questions, and then we'll proceed with a briefing from there. With that, I will turn it over to Jake.
Also, if you're new, subscribe, follow, like, share, subscribe.
Thank you,
all that good
Jen.
stuff.
Thanks, everybody. I'm here to provide a brief update on the situation with respect to Russia and Ukraine.
Oh, good.
We've now completed an intensive week of diplomacy in multiple formats: the Strategic Stability Dialogue, the NATO-Russia Council, and the OSCE. Russia raised its concerns, we raised our concerns, including the actions Russia has taken to undermine European security that Secretary Blinken spoke so eloquently about last week. We stuck to our core premise of reciprocity. We were firm in our principles and clear about those areas where we can make progress and those areas that are non-starters. Allied unity and transatlantic solidarity were on full display, and they remain on full display. The discussions were frank and direct. They were useful. They gave us and our allies things to consider. They gave Russia things to consider. We will now reflect and consult with allies and partners on how to proceed. We're prepared to continue with diplomacy to advance security and stability in the Euro-Atlantic. We're equally prepared if Russia chooses a different path. We continue to coordinate intensively
Is
with
there anything more
partners
boring
on severe
than
economic
a
measures
good old
in
political
response to a
statement
further
from a
Russian
politician?
invasion
I
of
wish a
Ukraine.
lot of these people were like
We continue to work with allies
podcasters
at
and
NATO
just
on changes in force posture and capabilities, especially on
didn't
NATO's
get
eastern
all
flank,
politician-y
if
on
that
us.
scenario arises. And we continue to support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in the defense of their sovereignty and territorial integrity. We have been very clear with Russia on the costs and consequences of further military action or destabilization in Ukraine. So we're ready either way. We're ready to make progress at the negotiating table, serious, tangible progress on important issues of concern to us, to Europe, and to Russia in an environment of de-escalation. And we're ready to take the necessary and proper steps to defend our allies, support our partners, and respond robustly to any naked aggression that might occur. In our view, diplomacy is the more sensible path. The Russians will have to make their own assessment. In terms of next steps in the diplomatic process, we'll remain engaged with allies and partners and with the Russians and make determinations in the coming days about what comes next. I'm going to leave it there and be happy to take your questions.
Is there an agreement to hold more talks with the Russians, Jake?
There are no dates set for any more talks. We have to consult with allies and partners first. We're in communication with the Russians, and we'll see what comes next.
Jake, could you address the Deputy Foreign Minister's comments, Sergei Ryabkov, suggesting that that Russia could deploy forces or rule out deploying forces in Latin America? Is that something that the U.S. is concerned about? Is that something that came up in those discussions?
I'm not going to respond to bluster in the public commentary. That wasn't raised in the discussions at the Strategic Stability Dialogue. If Russia were to move in that direction, we would deal with it decisively.
Another one on the Russian proposal suggested trying to reach some sort of agreement on keeping exercises away from the line of contact between NATO and Russia, or limiting the deployment of missiles and other weapons. Is that something that's on the table from the U.S. perspective, or is that not something that the U.S. could ever agree to?
As Deputy Secretary Sherman said in her readout of these meetings, and as was closely coordinated with allies and partners at NATO, we are prepared to discuss reciprocal limitations.
Is it me, or does this guy look like he needs a nap?
As long as Russia is prepared to fulfill its end of the bargain and that there's adequate verification. So we are prepared to have a detailed negotiation on that. Emphasis on detailed because the devil is often in the details on those things. We also, as Deputy Secretary Sherman indicated in her readout of these discussions, have said we are prepared to discuss reciprocal parameters around the size and scope and frequency of military exercises, but reporting that has suggested we're going to reduce the number of troops we have deployed or somehow cut back on our overall force posture in Europe, those reports are wrong. Yes.
I guess with no more talks scheduled with the Russians right now, as we sit here today, in your view, what is the likelihood of Russia invading?
I'm not going to put any kind of likelihood on it. What I'm going to say is that the United States and our allies and partners are prepared for any contingency, any eventuality. We're prepared to keep moving forward down the diplomatic path in good faith, and we're prepared to respond if Russia acts. And beyond that, all we can do is get ready, and we are ready.
Are they making the case, though, to invade, you believe?
What do you mean by making the case?
Is Russia trying to justify an invasion if one happens?
I'm not going to put myself in the head of the Russians. As you see from their public comments, they've said many different things, some of them contradictory. Different speakers over the course of this week have given both hopeful signs and deeply pessimistic signs. You'll have to ask them where they stand in respect to their positioning. From our perspective, we can just be clear about where we stand. And where we stand is ready to go down a principled path of diplomacy and ready to respond in the face of aggression.
The White House has often talked about this, and you've talked about this in President Biden, about having this stable, predictable relationship with Russia. Given the back and forth over these talks and the threats, is that even still possible?
We believe that diplomacy and diplomatic understandings that can be reached between the United States, our European allies and partners, and Russia can contribute to stability in Europe. That it is possible to make progress on things like missiles and exercises, as we just discussed. That ultimately we can get updates to some of the underlying issues related to transparency and deconfliction, that we can get to risk reduction and conflict management so that the overall security situation in Europe is more stable. That is certainly viable if Russia is prepared to engage in a good faith way. If they're not, and they choose to further invade Ukraine, then they are going to deal with the costs and consequences that the United States and our allies and partners will impose. Yeah.
You're still saying if. Does that mean you're still uncertain whether Russia is negotiating in good faith?
Well, the intelligence community has not made an assessment that the Russians have definitively decided.
I love that people
to
ask
take
questions that they know they
action
can't have the answer to.
So, as things stand right now, Russia
it's kind of my favorite
has the opportunity to come to the table as we go forward to deal with the very real concerns that we've put on the table, that Secretary Blinken has laid out publicly, and to negotiate in some of these areas that we've just been talking about. If Russia chooses to go a different path, we'll respond accordingly. But basically, we are still at a moment where we believe a path of diplomacy can operate in a way that vindicates and reflects our interests and principles, and we're prepared to work with our allies and partners on that. I think we're united with the European Union, with NATO, with Ukraine, with the rest of the countries of the Euro-Atlantic community on the notion that there is a diplomatic path forward here. We are also united with our allies and partners that if Russia chooses to go a different way for whatever reason or no reason at all, well, we'll be ready for that.
Ambassador Michael Carpenter is offering a different assessment. I'm sure you heard him say that the drumbeat of war is sounding loud and the rhetoric has gotten rather shrill. So do you agree with that or disagree?
Well, the Russians have put tens of thousands of troops in and around Ukraine and occupied territory relative to Ukraine. So it is certainly the case that the threat of military invasion is high. That's why I've stood at this podium repeatedly over the course of the past few months, warned about that, and laid out what would come as a result of that in respect to a response by the United States and our allies and partners. So there's no illusions on the part of the United States government. There's no illusions on the part of any of us who have been dealing with this issue about what the prospects are for potential conflict and potential military escalation by Russia. The point that I would make today is that the United States and our European allies and partners are prepared for multiple different eventualities. An eventuality that has us at the negotiating table working on these issues in a serious and substantive way, and the eventuality that has us responding to what Russia does in a clear, effective, forceful way that imposes significant costs on Russia for any action that it might take. Yeah.
On those actions, looking at Europe right now, it doesn't seem necessarily that they're prepared to join the aggressive multinational sanctions package that the U.S. has talked about. So if Vladimir Putin were to invade Russia tomorrow, are you confident that the sanctions that you've threatened Moscow with and that you would want to see out of Europe are lined up, ready to go? And secondly, the Kremlin sort of picked one element of sanctions legislation that's up on the Hill.
Does this guy look like an evil boss from a movie?
Yes, I will get you, my pretty. Yes!
I'm wondering, is that among the sort of package that you've signaled to them is on the table for Ukraine to be
Ask your question.
The main focus of the sanctions package that we've been working with Europe on have been significant financial sanctions with a start high, stay high mentality, not a graduated application of these sanctions, export controls that go at certain fundamental strategic industries in Russia, and other steps that we would take to ensure that Russia actually had to deal with the economic consequences of this invasion. In terms of your question about my level of confidence in our European allies and partners, I feel very good about the level of engagement and the level of convergence between the United States and Russia. A, on the fundamental proposition that there would have to be severe economic consequences, and B, on both the categories, types, and targets of sanctions that would have to flow. Does that mean that the U.S. and Europe are going to have precisely the same
line
list
dog face pony
down to
sword.
every last detail? No. Does it mean that I will be able to stand before you and say the United States and Europe have moved in unison on the application of severe economic measures? I'm confident that I will be able to do that.
Can I ask a question about the cybersecurity meeting that you held today?
Boring.
I'm wondering, in terms of the Log4j vulnerability, how many federal, or if federal systems have been affected by that vulnerability, if it was because the government hadn't done the necessary patchwork to prevent it from happening, and if the firms that you spoke with today made any commitments in terms of financial assistance or other assistance to maintain kind of critical open source software, since this seems to be an issue that continues to bubble up.
So
Open
first, the
source
president signed an
software.
executive order last year that goes to
It's a very triggering
procurement
statement
of
for a lot of
software
people.
by the United States government and fundamentally raises the game. And we're in the process of implementing that. And actually, where things stand
Very
with
triggering
respect
for
to
me.
departments and agencies of the U.S. government today as compared to nearly 1 year ago.
Sometimes
today
when they
when
have
the
these people
president
that
took
come out
office,
at the
we are in a
beginning,
much
they're
more
like,
robust posture,
they're just
and
so
that's due to the
boring.
work, not just
can't
of the interagency, but
even.
of specific departments and agencies that have implemented that executive order. In terms of the session today, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the companies in terms of the commitments they made, but it was an incredibly constructive discussion about ways that the public sector and the private sector can work effectively together to ensure that public sector systems are more robust and resilient and private sector systems are more robust and resilient. I'll leave it at that. And we will try to develop, along with the participants in that meeting, an agreed readout so that we're not betraying any confidences. Yeah.
On Russia and Ukraine, Secretary Blinken said at the start of the week that he didn't expect any major breakthroughs this week, but that one positive outcome could obviously be a de-escalation of tensions. Given the current state of play, given everything that you've said, what specifically does that look like for
You guys as bored as
Russia
me on this
de-escalating
thing?
right now?
It would involve them reducing the number of forces that they have deployed in aggressive postures towards Ukraine. That would ultimately be a key part of de-escalation. There are other steps that Russia could take in respect to de-escalation that go far beyond Ukraine as well. But in terms of the proximate challenge in and around the border of Ukraine, that would be an important step. I would also say one other thing that I think is very important that, Tony, you mentioned Secretary Blinken's comments at the beginning of the week. He said something at the end of last week that I want to underscore, which is that our intelligence community has developed information, which has now been downgraded, that Russia is laying the groundwork to have the option of fabricating a pretext for an invasion, including through sabotage activities and information operations, by accusing Ukraine of preparing an imminent attack against Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. We saw this playbook in 2014.
I can't stand when they're like talking and they have to like look down because they're being so disingenuous. They forgot what they have to say. They want to make sure they're sticking to their narrative. They're like, we're not doing anything.
It's clear that the U.S. will respond in the face of Russian aggression, but I'm trying to get a sense of what the U.S. would need to see in order to actually respond. Would it have to be tanks and troops crossing the border, or would things like moving helicopters and tactical weapons be enough for the U.S. to take steps to impose sanctions?
When you say moving helicopters and tactical weapons, you mean onto the territory of Ukraine? Our position is quite straightforward. If the Russian military
Straight as an
moves
arrow
across the Ukrainian frontier to seize territory, we believe that that is the further invasion of Ukraine, and it will trigger a response from the United States and the
I'm
international
triggered.
community. Yeah.
Thank you, Jake. I want to ask about your current policy in this crisis, but first, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to ask something of a historical nature first. I assume, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that in preparation for President Biden's first summit with President Putin, held in Geneva last June, the National Security Team undertook a comprehensive review of the official documentary record of all the interactions that President Trump had with President Putin. You may recall during the Trump presidency, we saw reporting to the effect that Mr. Trump and or his aides took some steps to prevent the maintenance of a full record of those interactions. Without asking you to disclose any classified information, can you assure us on 2 points? Number one,
No, I can't.
did your review uncover any evidence of any effort at any point along the way in the creation and storage of those records to tamper with that process? And number two, did your review uncover any evidence of any impropriety of any kind or severity on the part of President Trump in his interactions with President Putin?
On that question, I've got nothing for you.
Exactly.
current
Why are
policy.
you asking a question they can't answer? I
This
don't get
administration
this.
has tried without success
a
to
waste
use
of your
sanctions
career.
to compel the military in Myanmar to abandon its coup d'etat. This administration has used sanctions without success to compel China to release the concentration camp inmates in Xinjiang. The Obama administration, of course, used sanctions without success to try to deter Russian annexation of Crimea. Here you stand again, brandishing the threat of sanctions to try to deter a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Why shouldn't this be perceived as clinging to a failed tactic? And why shouldn't President Putin assess on that basis that his adversary is operating from a position of relative weakness?
President Putin has indicated that what he does not want to see is further NATO force posture coming closer to his border. President Putin has indicated that what he does not want to see is further American and allied support.
It's not that I
to
agree with
Ukraine.
that question.
President Putin
I
has
just-
indicated that what he does want to see is the further strengthening.
It's nice to
Russian
have a
strategic industries
well-articulated
in the
question
Russian
every
economy.
once in a while from this group.
We
of
have
people.
laid out on all of those metrics that Russia will suffer costs and consequences in the event of a further invasion of Ukraine.
He
And
made up for asking that
he can make
stupid
his own
question in the
determination
beginning.
about what he wants to do. But the United States is going to act. We're going to act with our allies and partners.
We're not
on
going to
those
do
issues in those
anything.
ways. We have
And
the
I
capacity
don't know
to
if
do
I
that,
care.
and we will do that.
I
and
mean,
President
shout out to
Biden has
my
been clear that
brothers in
that's what we intend
Ukraine.
to do. Yeah.
Sanctions work?
Well, so first I would say that if you go back to
No, sanctions
a
don't
personal
work.
experience I had, which was the negotiation of the interim agreement and then contributing to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, we do believe that economic pressure on Iran had a meaningful impact on bringing it to the table and ultimately putting a lid on its nuclear program. There are other instances where sanctions have worked, and of course there are instances across administrations, Democrat and Republican alike, where sanctions have not achieved the full result. And so I'm not going to stand before you and say sanctions are a panacea, they're a tool that solves every problem. But remember, sanctions are only one part of the way that we and our allies are talking about how we will deal with a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have other tools to bring to bear as well. Those tools also bear on the interests and the security capacities of the Russian Federation. And our goal at the end of the day here is not to get into an escalatory spiral. It is to find a way forward.
What are y'all's thoughts
consistent
on
with
the
our
Russia-Ukraine
principles,
situation?
Consistent with our interests, and
What do you feel like is
consistent
the
with
answer?
Open, transparent consultation with
Is
our
it to
allies,
sit back and not do
to pursue
anything and just
diplomacy.
because
If that works, great. If that doesn't work, we're ready.
it's not America, or do we intervene? I
Is
just
the
don't.
window of time closing when it comes to diplomacy on this issue? And when you talk about options that are on the table, you said sanctions is one of the tools. What are the other options? Presidents have a whole host of options, and they've always said when they are met with these types of situations, all options are on the table. Are all options on the table for this moment?
Well, we've been
God, what a
clear
silly
both
question.
directly to the Russians, and we've actually been clear publicly about some of the other options. And they include changes in the forces and capabilities that the United States and NATO would deploy to Eastern Flank allies to reinforce and strengthen the robustness of Allied defense on Allied territory. We've made clear that in the event of an invasion, in addition to the support we are currently providing to the Ukrainians, we would
All right, if this
dramatically
press
ramp up
conference has
that
become
support,
fire
to
soon,
support their territorial
Wrap it.
integrity and sovereignty. We've
I
also
need
been clear that we
something.
are going to work in tandem with allies and partners, not just in Europe, but in other parts of the
It's
world,
just too much.
on export controls that would have an impact on strategic industries in Russia. So those are some of the
Alright,
extra,
chat,
the
chat.
additional tools that we
should
can
get
bring
into
to
making
bear
YouTube shorts.
in this
We should.
context.
Hey.
All of them go
Yeah,
to
I should.
the basic
I
proposition.
can't tell if
that the
YouTube
United
Shorts are worth
States
it or
is going
not.
to look to strengthen and reinforce our position and our allies' position, and to support the Ukrainians in the event of an invasion, further invasion of Ukraine.
What about the window of opportunity for diplomacy? Is that closing, as I asked earlier?
Look, it's hard for me to characterize where things stand on the diplomacy because we've come through these 4 days. We need to sit and consult with allies and
But yeah,
partners.
I'll try it
Maybe
out.
Sherman is just getting off a plane. She may have gotten off a plane in the last few hours.
That
We'll
tuck
take stock of where we
2000,
are.
bruh.
We'll consult, and then we'll determine next steps. The Russians will have to do the same. And all I can tell you is, as far as we're concerned, we are ready to move forward on diplomacy, and we are ready to go down the other path.
These
And
questions are all
both
pointless.
Of those, in my view, that
just-
question of which path
He's not going
is
to be able to
one that
respond to
is
the
facing
things
us now.
which
It's
people
not
want them to
facing us a
respond
year from now,
to.
5 years from now.
We're not going to say
It's
we're going
facing
to
us
war.
in
They
the-
want them to
in the
say that.
foreseeable future. Yeah.
Thank you so much. What happens if nothing happens? I mean, if Russia doesn't invade Ukraine but keeps
Oh,
like this
where are you
massive
from?
amount of troops at the border, is this something you can live with? In this case, would there be sanctions,
Biden is false.
less sanctions, no sanctions at all?
Yeah.
So
I don't think
we're
Biden's
trying
alone on
to,
that one.
First of all, deter and prevent
I think I'm about to fall asleep.
potentially massive.
This guy
Russian
looks like an
invasion.
avatar of
That's step
somebody
number one. If we end
who
up in a
reads you a
circumstance
bedtime
of the kind
story
you described,
as you
we'll
fall
deal with that
asleep,
as
and
it
then he
comes,
like
but I'm not
kills
gonna
you
get into
because he's a
hypotheticals
secret
today.
government
That's our
spy.
reaction. I'll just take one more
I
question.
don't know.
To follow up, but at this moment, are we in a position where what the next step is reducing the troops at on the borders of Ukraine? Is this the next thing that can happen that could satisfy the U.S. and the allies?
What do you mean by the next thing?
What would, after the week we've had, what are we expecting? That they take, of course, we're hoping that the Russian troops back off. But is this the only next step possible? Of course, there's the invasion, but after the entire week of diplomacy.
Tuckett, what do you think we should do
what
about
I've said all
Russia
along
and
is that
Ukraine?
we're
What are
happy
your
to talk.
thoughts? Let me
We're
know.
happy to talk about our interests and our concerns. We're happy to listen to the Russians talk about their interests and their concerns. But we've also been very clear from the beginning that to make concrete progress, real tangible progress, it has to happen in an environment of de-escalation. So we will have to see now on the diplomatic path what comes next. We'll have to determine that first with our friends and then in engagement with the Russians. And as I stand here today, I can't tell you what the next steps will be.
Come on,
I can only tell you that the United States, the Biden administration, our allies and partners, we're prepared to deal with whatever comes.
The ambiance in the negotiation today, I mean, you made reference to the pessimist or the different statements we heard, but the Russians officials had a more pessimistic and negative tone. Did they have the same tone when they were face to face with the?
They were professional and businesslike.
A
We clearly
tone
disagreed
question?
on things, and there were
These are
areas where
professional
both sides saw there was
journalists.
a possibility for progress. Beyond that, it's hard for me really to characterize their point of view. They can characterize it for themselves. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
We're always excited. Okay.
All right, maybe we get some fire.
I know there's a lot going on, so we'll try to get around to everybody. I just have
All right, let's
two,
talk about the vaccine
items
mandate
for all of you at the top.
thing for the SCOTUS.
Sorry, lots of stuff in
Supreme
here.
Court just knocked down
in
vaccine
December,
mandates.
as a part of the administration's approach to strengthening America's supply chains, address bottlenecks, and lower prices for Americans, the Department of Transportation and the Department of Labor announced the Biden-Harris Trucking Action Plan.
You're a lying
Today,
dog-faced
to uphold
pony
the
soldier.
30-day commitments made in the Trucking Action Plan. The Department of Transportation and the Department of Labor are announcing next steps on several new initiatives. Some of which were mandated by the infrastructure law to support drivers, improve driver retention, while expanding access to quality driving jobs now and in the years ahead. These include expanding registered apprenticeship programs, more than 100 employees and industry partners. All right. Everything's okay. I think just a statement may have gone out on the Supreme Court ruling that probably is in
Yes,
your inboxes.
there it
so
is.
That's one note for all of you.
All right, let's talk about.
These steps announced today include expanding registered apprenticeship programs. More than 100 employers and industry
She didn't wanna
partners have
talk
stepped
about it.
forward to work to expand registered apprenticeships in the last 30 days. This is the gold standard of training and retaining a skilled workforce. Creating the Women of Trucking Advisory Board, mandated to gather input on how to build a more inclusive and equitable workplace for
Oh
women
my
in the
God.
trucking industry.
How about we
And
just
creating a
hire
new
truckers?
task
Why does it have to
force
be
investigate predatory trucking leasing
It needs to be
agreements
more
with the
inclusive,
Department of
even though
Labor,
you
the
work by
Consumer Finance
yourself.
Protection Bureau, and the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, beginning 2 studies to explore the issues of truck driver pay and unpaid detention time, and launching the Safe Driver Apprenticeship Pilot, an
We need
pilot
more
program for
women
truck
to
drivers. All
drive
of this
trucks.
is an effort to expand the number of truck drivers we have so we can move more goods.
Should just fire
get
all
more
the truck
goods onto
drivers
the
we have
shelves,
now and start
lower
over.
prices for American people. One more item for all of you.
We need another World War
This
to bring
Saturday,
the country
January
together.
15th,
Probably,
is the
man.
last day to sign up for the quality, affordable healthcare
I hope we
coverage
don't.
on healthcare.gov. A record 14.2
I freaking
million
hope we
people,
don't.
have enrolled since the start of open enrollment on November 1st on healthcare.gov alone. 4 out of 5 consumers are finding quality coverage for less than $10 per month. And a new HHS report out today found that thanks to the American Rescue Plan, a majority of healthcare.gov enrollees are also receiving subsidies to cut their copays, deductibles, and other out-of-pocket spending. To be sure to go to healthcare.gov, anyone listening, before midnight on January 15th and get covered. With that, Zeke, why don't you kick us off?
All right, Zeke.
My inbox is usually pretty fast, but I was hoping you can give us that reaction to the Supreme Court opinions. And on the substance of the matter there, how much of a blow is this to the administration's pandemic response plan? That the employer mandate part and testing or vaccination mandates halted, and how will that affect the course of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, I know there'll be a statement from the president that should be coming into your inboxes any moment now. But let me give you a quick reaction. First, let me start with some good news. News that maybe isn't getting enough attention yet. That's our jobs here, or my job here, I should say. CMS's requirement for healthcare workers to be vaccinated will save the lives of patients, as well as the lives of doctors, nurses, and others who work in healthcare settings. It will cover 17 million healthcare workers at 76,000 medical facilities. The Supreme Court upheld it, and we will enforce that.
Enforce
it?
You better not
the
enforce
Supreme
it,
Court's
Jen.
decision on the OSHA mandate essentially means that in this pandemic, it is up to individual employers to determine whether their workplaces will be safe for employees.
Oh
and
my
whether
God.
their businesses will be safe for consumers. So President
Oh, I
Biden,
hate
you'll
that
see
word,
this in his
safe.
statement, will be calling on and will continue to call on businesses to immediately join those who have already
You work at
stepped up,
Chick-fil-A
including
and you're not
1/3 of Fortune
safe.
100
Derek, I like that
companies,
you let these people
to
speak
institute
before you start
vaccination
commenting.
requirements
Most
to
of the
protect their workers, customers, and communities.
Hey,
We have to
Tucker,
keep
I
working
appreciate
together,
that.
in
Yeah,
order,
I kinda hate when they do
to,
that too, as I'm
get
doing
this
it
done
right
to
now.
Save more lives. I would note that there are
I appreciate
couple
that comment. It means a lot, actually.
Good signs in terms of without this. Even in spite of the ruling that we would point to. One is that 57%, according to a Navigator poll of Americans, support vaccine requirements. According to a Wills Tower Watson's report,
Did you say 57%?
a survey of 534 U.S. employers, a majority, 57% of respondents have or will require their employees to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Why? Because employees want to feel safe in the workplace, because they want to incentivize workers to come back to the workplace, and because they've seen large companies across the country implement this and see how effective it is.
What about that 40% that doesn't want it?
COVID topic. The president announced today that he's going to announce next
Imagine
week
that.
that he's going to be, the government's going to be making free, high-quality N95s available to Americans. There's the new testing website, which is launching next website. Why is it middle of January right now when a million Americans are testing positive for COVID a day roughly? Why is the president taking these steps now? Why didn't he take these 3 months ago?
Well, let me first say that what we've been working to implement
Hold
is
on.
building on the steps
Hold
we've taken
on.
over the last 6 months and more. Remember, when the president took office, there were 0 or 1 approved at-home testing option on the market. Now there are 9. We needed to expand the market capacity. The president used the Defense Production Act, $3
did
billion
Biden do for that?
invested to
What?
expand that market. The reason he was able to announce the purchase of, or the plan to purchase, an additional $500 million beyond the
Is there
$500
anything
million
funnier
he
than
already
listening to
announced
like a
because of the
politician take
expansion
credit
of the
for what
market.
the free market
and just
does?
since last summer,
They're like,
leading up to December, we
"That
had
was me."
quadrupled the size of the market. So if you look at the comparison, right now we're doing almost 12 million tests a day in this country. We were doing under 2 million tests a day a year ago. There's about 300 million tests that are happening in this country every single day, in part because there's 20,000 sites, because there are federal sites now across the country, new ones we announce every day, because we've sent 50 million tests to community health centers. So all of this is an effort to build on that.
If you can't
and
find
make
where to
sure
get
that
tested, that's
capacity
on
and
you.
and we're meeting the
We don't
unprecedented
need
demand
more
for tests.
testing sites.
These are steps that the president's taking now because there's a net need. Presumably, he could have done the exact same thing 3 months ago when maybe it would be in effect now when the need is obviously greater than the system has capacity to deliver.
Well, I would say, Zeke, that again, because of the steps we've taken, we're able to, there's 300 million tests that are happening in this country every single month. And that is enormous progress. We're not starting from 0. That is my point. So this is building on that. But in terms of the number of tests available on the market and the expansion of the market, remember, a number of them were just approved at the end of October or beginning of November. Using the Defense Production Act means we needed to ensure there's manufacturing capacity and build on that. This has all been a building process, and we're continuing to expand and build from here. I would also note that in recent polls, despite some of the conversations we have in here, it's less than 10% of the American public that can't find a test. We have expanded capacity, and you're seeing the impact of that across the country.
Lastly, on the voting push, we've heard a lot from the president talking about Republican-controlled states taking actions to limit ease of access to the polls. I'm wondering, election laws we know differ from state jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Has the president ever reached out to Democratic states, states like New York that don't have early in-person voting, or New Jersey or Delaware that have some different laws that exist, maybe down south, and called and encouraged them to loosen their voting laws to bring them in line with some of the restrictions he's objecting to being rolled back right now?
Well, I think the president's view on expanding access
That's a wordy
to voting,
question.
whether it's the expansion of early voting or
we go.
the number of mail-in voting boxes, steps we know
Get into
works
your
to
political
increase
stance, Jen.
the participation of people in the process is something it's very well known that he strongly supports. The DNC typically does a lot of the outreach on election implementation, but I don't think it's a secret where the president stands, and certainly you heard him say that earlier this week and convey it again on Capitol Hill today.
Could you talk about,
go ahead.
give us a few details of what the back and forth was like with the president and the senators at the lunch? He sounded pretty frustrated when he came out.
Ooh, I love that.
I think he
the
sounded
old man
passionate.
stands
That's
with
what
the
I saw and
hands
heard.
on the other seat in
Look,
front.
I think
That's a
the
power
president
move.
conveyed directly to the caucus what many people heard him say across the country a couple of days ago. That now we face a systematic effort to dismantle democracy, not just voter suppression, but subversion.
God.
You heard him say that when he came out.
Anytime she
and
starts
spoke
using big
to,
words
spoke
like
after
she
he
normally
left
does
the
it,
meeting.
like
He
systematic,
conveyed that this is
and
a
she
historic
looks
chance to
down.
save
It's
our
just
democracy. Need to protect the fundamental
just
form of American
tune
government.
out because
And
it's
his
just
views
a
is
it's just a
absolutely
narrative that was
bipartisan.
given down to
I know
her to
we've talked
say.
a bit about the history of Senator McConnell's support.
It's not
multiple
genuine
times
at
over,
all.
Writing about it in his book for voting rights in the past. There are 16 Republicans serving now who supported voting rights in the past. Even as the president has said,
You have a
Strom
right to
Thurmond
vote.
did back in
I don't know if
the 80s.
people know
Obviously
that.
not serving today, but just as an example. So that's part of the point he made. Also, I think it's important for everybody to understand that his view is that he would put his record of standing up for the history of the Senate, the institution of the Senate, the rules of the Senate up against anyone's. Democrat, Republican, anyone serving today and before then. But his view is that it's a time, there are times in history, now is one of them, where you can't allow the protection of process to get in the way of protecting people's fundamental rights. That is also an argument that he made today to the caucus.
How do people listen to this and not go, wait,
Well,
have I not
Leader
been
Schumer,
voting fairly?
has obviously conveyed what his plan and his path forward is. And I think members are going to have an opportunity to vote and decide and determine what side of history they want to be on. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Did Senator Sinema's remarks on the floor today come as a surprise to President Biden, or had she conveyed them in private to the president or to the White House?
I'm not going to get into private conversations with any senator, including Senator Sinema.
Semina
I'm
and
not going to get
Manchin.
into more details about private
Manchin have been saying the same thing.
During his first press conference last March, the president was asked if there was anything he could do to protect voting rights outside of passing legislation. At the time, he said yes, but I don't want to reveal my strategy. Now, can you tell us whether the White House has identified any more executive actions that the president can
Oh my
and
God.
plans to
What
take?
number of executive
first
orders
I would
is
say the
Biden
president
on?
did sign a historic executive order early on in his presidency.
Yeah,
also,
everything he
since
does
that
is
period
historic.
of time, I believe the Department of Justice has doubled their funding and support for protection of voting rights in states. Obviously, he has spoken about this issue very vocally in recent months, since that period of time, multiple times as well. The vice president has been leading this effort to gather support across the country, and we're of course going to continue to look for ways to protect people's fundamental rights. The next step is, of course, these votes in the Senate.
I have a question about a video that Iran's Supreme Leader posted on his
Oh,
website.
that video's
It appears
crazy.
To show a robot conducting a drone strike, killing the former president at his Mar-a-Lago golf club. Is the intelligence community assessing this threat and working with former President Trump to offer protection of any kind?
I'm not going to speak to the work of our intelligence community. Obviously, the kind of rhetoric or video from the Supreme Leader is something that we've seen, offensive rhetoric and behavior in the past. But I'm not going to speak to more specifics of internal discussions.
But are you aware of the video?
I don't have any more details on it.
And then one more for a colleague who's not here.
I love
The
these
embassy
questions.
in Baghdad, the U.S. Embassy just tweeted about an attack that happened there. Do you have any details or any response?
I don't. This may have just recently happened. I don't have any more details, but we can venture to get you something after the briefing.
Go ahead. Back on the Supreme Court's decision, more than 80 million people would have been affected by this vaccine and testing mandate. So what kind of impact does this decision have on the broader effort just to get COVID under control?
Well, I think we're already looking at this point in time of more than 71% of people have had both shots that to make them fully protected. Obviously, we're encouraging people, of course, to get boosted. More than 80%, 83%, I believe, at this point, have had their first shot. We're going to continue
ton
to work
of people.
full speed at doing that. Obviously, this was a step that we announced and we
If
had every intention of
83% have
implementing
taken the
because
vaccine, what are
knew
we
that it
what
was
are we
the
doing
point
here?
where putting in place requirements in the workplace would help get more people vaccinated. The good news
83%.
is that
That's a
a
ton.
number of companies have already decided to do that and do that successfully. And the work and the effort is really going to be on
Just
their
take the
shoulders.
W
really
and
it's
go,
going to
but it's
depend on
not
how
about that,
effective
is it?
And your message to employees and workers who may see this decision and be concerned about what comes next for them?
Our message is that we're going to continue to work with employers across the country and continue to convey very clearly what the benefit of vaccine or testing requirements would be on workplaces, both as many companies struggle to fill their workplaces, struggle to bring people back to the workplace, people who are concerned about their safety, that this is an effective measure, and there are many models across the country to implement it. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Should we expect the administration to try to issue a more targeted mandate following the Supreme Court ruling today?
I don't have any additional predictions of next steps here.
But are you going to try this again, or are you accepting what the Supreme Court decided?
Again, they just decided any legal action, I'd obviously defer to the Department of Justice, but at this point in time, what we are encouraging private sector companies to do is to take steps that have effectively worked around the country, that the vast majority of employers have indicated they have the intention to do. Okay, and when it comes to the lunch that happened today, Senator Sinema, before the president got up there, reiterated that she does not want to change the 60-vote threshold. Senator Manchin just said now in a statement that he does not want to change that. Has the president accepted that he cannot sway them when it comes to changing the filibuster and creating an exception? I think we're going to keep fighting till the votes are had. But they have said today that they are not changing their positions, despite an appeal directly from the president. And the president spoke to this after. Look, his job is to take on
the filibuster
tough challenges,
is good.
to speak out for what's right. And
You
he
do
thinks
not
making
want
changes to the rules
a Congress
in order to
just
get voting rights
and a
passed and
Senate
protect
to
people's
just
fundamental
blow
rights
through
is right.
laws and
We'll
create
leave it to
new
Leader
laws
Schumer on what the next steps
and
are
new
and what the
spending
process
all
is
the
from
time.
here.
You need
But
checks
we're
and
gonna
balances
keep,
in
having
life.
meetings,
Everyone
keep
does.
having
I
calls,
need
and
it.
that will be what the president's focus will be.
I need to be
What was your
checked.
response to seeing Senator Sinema come out just a few minutes before he got up there, which she knew what he was coming to talk about, and say that she did not support it?
I think the president was most focused on speaking directly to the caucus, not on her comments. Go
And so
ahead.
what is the president's, I guess, the administration's backup plan when it comes to voting rights and getting legislation passed? Is there a backup plan? As you heard the president say when he came out of the caucus meeting, we're going to keep at it. We're going to stay at it. The president's. But what does that mean, I guess, is what people would
That
like
means,
to know.
Caitlin, that any piece of legislation that's ever passed.
Ooh, she used your
that's
first
hard,
name.
that's
She
difficult,
is not happy
goes
with
through
you.
Goes through some ups and downs and goes through some challenges. That doesn't mean you give up. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is continuing to fight for what's right, continuing to fight to get something
And when
done.
in doubt,
That
sign
means
an
sometimes it
executive
fails. We don't
order.
know what will happen next. That means sometimes
That's what
there
leadership
are
looks
gaps between when you get to move forward. We're going to have to determine what the next steps are. But in the meantime, the president is going to continue to make calls. He's going to continue to engage with his colleagues, and that's where his focus is on at this point in time. Go ahead.
Thank you. I had a couple specific ones, but I wanted to kind of follow on that. As you're determining next steps, I mean, frankly, things just seem like they're going pretty poorly right now. For the White House, Build Back Better is being blocked, voting rights is being blocked, diplomatic talks with Russia doesn't seem to have brought us back from the brink of war. Inflation's at a 40-year high. The virus is setting records for infection. So as we kind of
What a
hit this
list.
one-year period and a period where everything seems like it's in pretty rough
You know,
shape
Jen's
for
like,
nearly
I-
everything, which is not an invitation. to
Just
make
ask
us
me the
list
question.
some other things. I'm wondering at what point do you take stock and say that things need to change internally, whether it's your outreach for the Hill, whether it's the leadership within the White House. You seem to be stymied on an incredible number of fronts right now.
Well, let me give you a little bit of a different take on this. More
Yeah,
than
let me
200
spin it for
million
you. Let
people
me
are
show you what
vaccinated. We've had
politics is
record
all
job
about.
growth, record low unemployment rates. Historically in this country over the last year, we've rebuilt our alliances and our relationships around the world. And right now, as
Like
it
with
relates
Russia?
to Russia, as you heard our national security advisor convey, we're working with partners around the world to convey very clearly. It's up to them to make a choice about what's next. We're not going to make that on their behalf. It's up to them to determine if there are going to be crippling economic sanctions or not, or if they decide to move forward. But we also recognize when you have a small margin and threshold in the Senate,
Bet
it's
he's
very
not invited
difficult to
back
get
again,
things
not after
done
that
and
question.
to get legislation passed. And the fact that the president, under his
4,
leadership,
4,
got
1,
the
5,
American Rescue
1.
Plan passed, a
What up,
bipartisan
dude?
infrastructure bill with 19 votes in the Senate, about 6 votes in the House. The fact that we are still continuing to work with members to determine the path forward on Build Back Better, that we have the vast majority of Democrats.
He's going to be
in Senate
farther
supporting
back in
voting rights. That's a
the
path forward for
arena
us. And our effort
tomorrow.
is to do hard things,
Like,
try
wait a
hard
minute,
things,
this was
and
my
keep at it.
seat.
So we just don't see it through the same prism.
So the sense is
you're in
things
the
are going
back.
well, there's no need for change right now.
I think that having worked in a White House before, you do hard things in White Houses. You have every
Yes,
challenge
please.
at your feet, laid at your feet, whether it's global or domestically. And we could certainly
What?
propose legislation to see if people support bunny rabbits and ice cream, but that wouldn't be very rewarding to the American people. So the president's view is we're going to keep pushing for hard things, and we're going to keep pushing the boulders up the hill to get it done.
Two quick things. The president announced the distribution of high-quality masks
Mhm.
earlier today. That's been kind of a vague and undefined phrase. I understand well-fitting, like what that literally means,
Yeah.
but in terms of the masks that you're trying to procure, do you have a sense of the N95s, KN95s in that universe, or is that just we're not quite there in the
Can you
We-
put
we'll
more
have
lackadaisical
more,
with your
I
question
expect
or
in the coming
melancholy
days on that.
attitude?
And,
I mean,
but
God.
right now, just
about
so
to take a
people
nap.
understand the backstory here, the history, I should say, is
Just Monica.
we've distributed more than 30 million masks to food banks and
Uh,
community health centers. States
I don't
have
even
been
see
doing that
Peter
as
in this
well.
conference.
We have a stockpile
Who's
of
gonna ask
700
the
million
fiery question?
high-quality masks in the government, and they are also widely available across the country. So what we're talking about here is making high-quality masks, as you know, available to the American people for free. There are a lot of ranges of high-quality masks. I think we'll have more details on that, on what that looks like next week.
I know you're limited
God.
a little bit about what you can say about politics.
Go get a
but the
haircut,
RNC
dude.
said today that they would ask
How old
their
is this guy?
candidates not to,
12, 13?
Participate in debates held by the commission that has done it for the last few decades.
Just kidding.
Do you
Nothing
or the
wrong
president
with
have any reaction to that move by the RNC?
Well, the president has participated in many debates over the course of his career and believes they play a role in allowing the American people to hear from candidates and where they stand.
Brandon, what up? Notice she didn't say
so
what
I
kinds
think
of
it's more
high
posed-
quality.
question
Yeah.
best posed to the RNC. On
The
what
highest
they're so
quality
afraid
from
In
China.
a debate that was planning to run for re-election, at least he said, and would he participate in a debate outside of the commission?
I would point you to the DNC for that and any more specifics. Go ahead.
The president, when he spoke to reporters after the Senate lunch today, he spoke about the voting rights push in the past tense. He said, "We missed this time." What then is the political value in moving forward with these show votes, given that the president effectively has acknowledged that this process has ended and risks potentially shining a light on Democratic divisions?
Well, I think you all can count who's for and against each vote, whether it's changes to the Senate rules or supporting these voting bills themselves. And I think it's very people publicly know where senators stand at this point in time. We will leave it to, and we'll work in lockstep with him, Leader Schumer, to determine what the next steps are here. And I know he's spoken a bit to that. But ultimately, this is about continuing to press to move forward on the protection of voting rights and to use it as a moment to elevate this issue as an important issue.
You have a
for
right to
people
vote.
across the
I'm
country.
gonna say that every time I
and of
hear
course,
her
any
say
new
that.
senator is going to be put in the position of determining what side of history they're going to stand on, and that's I
What
guess the purpose
side
of a
of
vote.
history?
The president also spoke about
This is a
voter
momentous
subversion when he spoke
occasion.
to reporters.
Yeah.
But neither the Freedom to Vote Act nor the John Lewis Voting Rights Act deal with subversion. They're focused more on suppression. Would the president want to see Democrats, if this process does move forward in the future, address laws in these 19 states, some of which would potentially allow for the overturning of a free and fair election?
Well, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, actually in Section 112, actually makes it illegal for state officials to willfully fail or refuse to certify the aggregate tabulations of votes or certify the election of the candidates receiving
There she
sufficient
goes,
such votes
reading
to
her
be
little
elected to
notebook,
office.
reading her
That
little
is
narrative
obviously
journal.
addressing a root problem. We're seeing
I don't know how
in
to
laws
answer this. Let
in
me
many
look at my
states
notebook.
across the country. And what these laws are
Joe
meant
Biden
to
has
do
been
is
amazing
provide
since
some
day one.
fundamental
And
baselines for protections
he's
for
trying to
voters,
get freedom
and that's an
of
important part of doing it.
voting
Obviously,
Creole.
there's more you will continue to build from there, but that's an important component, I think, that sometimes everyone isn't always aware of in the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Oh, go ahead.
But one unrelated question about the U.S. Postal Service. Yesterday, the Board
Vaccine?
of Governors elected a new chairman, someone who has expressed support for Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, who, as you know, has had a very controversial tenure. What's the White House position on the persistent delivery delays that the Postal Service seems to be experiencing, at least anecdotally, and DeJoy's current place as Postmaster General? Does he deserve to have that role?
What a great title of a
I will
role.
tell you that going back to
I'm
the
the
holidays,
postmaster.
97 or 98% of packages from the Postal Service were delivered on time. So there may be anecdotes from that 1 or 2%, but that's actual data.
Yeah. How dare you bring up
Okay, but
the
98,
timing of
98%
packages?
across the country.
98,
we have expressed
okay.
concerns in the past about DeLay's leadership. DeJoy, that was a little slip there. DeJoy's leadership in the past, that has not changed. I will say, though, and I know this has been raised, so I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to address it, that many members of the Postal Service, including leadership, has expressed confidence and an interest in playing the role in delivering tests to people across the country, and their confidence in doing exactly that. So we take them at their word, and certainly we're encouraged by the data we saw from December. Go ahead, April. Oh, April, let me first say, 25 years covering the White House. That's pretty significant.
Girl, you old.
I don't have a song for this, but just congratulations. I mean, I'm a terrible singer, so we don't want that anyway. Go ahead.
Yes, we do.
You could give me an interview with the president, but that's a whole other thing. On the record, right. On another issue, Jen, the issue of policing. As you're working on voting rights, we understand
2%, that's a whole lot. Yeah, it is a whole lot of packages. Let's be real.
In order to bring more teeth into protections for people, Americans, particularly minorities who are dying at the hands of bad policing. What is different with this executive order versus what could have happened on Capitol Hill? We understand laws have more teeth, but I understand that you guys are working to bring more teeth into these executive orders. Talk to me about that.
It's a great question, April, and as you
Is
know
it,
from
though?
covering this closely,
I don't know
we
what the
were
heck
kind of
she's talking
waiting
about.
on
Bringing
any
more teeth
executive
into
orders,
executive orders?
out of deference to the negotiations that were happening in a bipartisan manner. And of course, we believe that the ability, especially in a bipartisan way, when possible, to move forward on legislation makes it permanent, right? And that is not the case, of course, with executive orders. In terms of the specific details, they are under discussion. I just don't have anything I can outline for you at this moment because there's an internal policy discussion.
So I understand there's a sense of urgency on it. I was told from one source it was days, and then others said it could be.
She's talking so
weeks, but
quiet.
It's happening soon. Why the sense of urgency right now, especially when you're dealing with voting rights, trying to figure that out as well?
You know, I think there's a recognition and a commitment by the president to deliver on what he promised. And of course, we were very supportive of the efforts to negotiate police reform on a bipartisan level. Obviously, that didn't move forward as we would have hoped. And so there's a legal policy substantive process that has to go through in the consideration of executive orders. That's ongoing. It is hard to predict the timing of that, so I don't want to do that from here. But it's a reflection of the president's commitment to delivering on his promise.
And last question: when President-elect, I guess you would say, Joe Biden was building his cabinet, he specifically singled out Marcia Fudge for her work and the fact that she was one of the presidents of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated that is having its Founders Day. He talked about the great work that the sorority
These people,
does.
they want to
What
have a
does he
speech.
have
They
for
don't
the
want to ask a
Delta
question.
Sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated today.
It's a
as they
sorority
celebrate
question?
Founders Day, since he knows about them so well.
Of course. Well,
He doesn't
the
know
president
them.
wishes the women
He's
of
a
Delta
politician,
Sigma Theta
and he just
Sorority
says these things.
Incorporated a happy 109th Founders Day. And
Look
many
at her
more years of
reading.
academic
They don't know
excellence
these
and service
things.
To those who are members. The president has been very vocal of his support, as you noted, April, for Delta Sigma Theta and all Divine
I
Nine.
love that people that
sororities
actually
and
believe that
fraternities in
crap. They're like,
October,
he
as
knows
President
me.
Harris hosted a
He
historic
knows
meeting
my
of the Divine
club.
Nine Council of Presidents at the White House, which included immediate past President Beverly
What a
Smith,
weird
and we're
question.
incredibly
That
grateful to the
seems
work
like a
he as,
staged
Delta
question.
Sigma Theta has done to uplift communities across the world, especially the hard
Delta
work of
Sigma
former
Theta
National
is a
President and
question
current
at the press
HUD
briefing
Secretary
today.
Marcia Fudge and the women
When you have
of Delta
inflation
Sigma Theta who work on behalf of the American people
at
in the Biden
record
administration
levels,
each and every day, of which I hear there are a few.
You
Go
have
ahead.
Russia, you have
Also,
Kazakhstan, you have so much going on in the
kind
world.
of question.
We're talking
Sure.
about a sorority.
When you listen to the president's inauguration address, you hear the words unity, you hear better angels.
Oh, here comes the
You
Russian
hear these
spy.
words in his speeches at the Capitol or in Georgia. Does it mean that he has changed his state of mind, and does he think that America can't be unified anymore?
No, actually, quite the contrary. I mean, the president believes that protecting people's
Unification
fundamental rights
through
to vote,
submission.
participate in the
Everyone
process,
knows that.
whether
It's
you're a
the
Democrat,
easiest
a
way that we can all
Republican,
bend the
independent,
knee.
Whatever party you are a member of, that is not a partisan issue. It should be a unifying issue. And that is why he reflected when he went to the caucus today
But it's
on the
not,
fact that
Jen.
there are 16 Republicans who have supported voting rights in the
Read
past.
the
Because
room.
it has not been historically a partisan issue. And he's not prejudging who people support. He is trying to protect people's ability to participate in the process.
Maybe just a follow-up, if I may. With the Congress as it is, with the Supreme Court as it is, what's the way forward for the rest of the mandate? Is it more executive orders? Is it smaller steps rather than big transformative?
Of course, it's more
reforms?
executive orders.
What's the idea?
Well, that's a big question, but I would say that the president has had, we feel we've had a lot of success over the past year, getting the economy back on stronger footing, getting 200 million Americans vaccinated, getting a bipartisan infrastructure bill passed, rebuilding our relationships in the world and America's standing in the world. And what we want to do now is build on that in year 2. That means continuing to press to get voting rights done, to get Build Back Better done. To get CHIPS funding passed so we can ensure that manufacturing happens in the United States. So of course there's still big, bold pieces of the president's agenda he wants to get done, and he's going to keep fighting for it.
Yeah, we want to
It is also
manufacture
true
United
that it
States,
is
but we also want to
challenging
cripple
to
these
move
businesses.
things forward with such a small margin
It makes sense.
in
It's
Congress,
science.
and he is very well aware of that. We've been living it for almost a year now. Go ahead.
Jen, a testing question that a couple from cool colleagues who
Sure.
be here. The president mentioned the other 500 million tests that
Yep.
are now in the works. Can you give us any sense on timeline when you're looking at contracts, when you're looking at delivery, when people will actually end up seeing them after they see this first 500 million?
Sure. So I had said earlier this week that we were looking to finalize our contracts for the first 500 million within the 2 weeks. I can give you an update that now we're at the point where we've procured about 380 million of those tests, and we're going to continue to build from there.
Also,
So
those
the
are new.
plan
Make sure you
is to,
subscribe.
We feel we're making very strong progress, of
Appreciate
course.
ya.
And after
Tell
we
your friends and
conclude this
family
phase,
about the
we'll
show.
begin awarding contracts for today's announcement.
And if you
We'll
missed
continue to
my
proceed
beginning
from there.
portion about Joe Rogan,
rough
rewind that
ballpark
junk. I thought it was a good podcast.
That second
good show.
500 million might.
Not yet. We may be able to as we kind of proceed in the process, as we have done with the first 500 million, but I don't have a specific update yet at this point in time, just a status update on the first 500 million, and obviously when we conclude this phase, we'll move to the next 500 million.
You had mentioned earlier in the briefing that less than 10% of the population is now having trouble finding a test. Can you kind of...
Said there was a recent poll. I'm happy to tweet it after the briefing if you'd like, to make it available to all of you. I think it was a YouGov poll.
See, we know how much you love anecdotal data, but people talking about the long waits, people talking about CVS, et cetera, et cetera. The president made it a point to say testing has gotten so much better today, but that would be pretty stark if it's now 1 in 10 Americans claiming that they're
Well, I said a recent poll, which I think is just important to note because
Look, we pulled
obviously
3 people
we've
outside.
been doing to date and where we are at this point in time. Is
I've never been
300
part of
million
any
tests,
political poll.
every single month.
Have you?
That is a lot of tests, and sometimes you would think that no one is able to get a test and no one is being tested when nearly 12 million people are being tested every day. At the same time, as I have said, as the president has said, we want to do more, and we are continuing to do more. And that's why we're running this expedited process to procure more tests to ensure they're free, they're accessible, and they're available to people across the country.
And they're equitable.
Oh, go ahead.
Got that word.
colleagues,
Okay.
if you will. The FAA ground stop earlier this week
Yeah.
on the heels of the North Korean missile test. Can you give us an idea what information you all have about that? And is there a fear that these tests, North Korean tests, may actually pose some type of danger or issue for U.S. civil aviation?
I believe the FAA has spoken to this and taken kind of a look back at what happened. I think it was a 15-minute ground stop, and they have reflected on the procedures that happened and taken a look for them moving forward. I would note that our national security and most importantly our defense officials across the country after those tests conveyed that no officials were at risk. So I'd really
I was once when I was a kid on
as they assess
my mom's landline never
that
had.
decision last week or earlier this week. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, a committee to protect journalists report questioning
Okay.
freedom advocates are
I actually signed up online to participate
concerned
in a
with
political
your
polls.
administration
So you were on a
in terms of
landline.
access to
Okay.
the
Signed up a.
voters, timely response.
Oh.
You know, the request
Timely
had
responses
majority.
from our press office?
Maybe I should sign up for
Two
political
queries.
polls
Do that.
today. See, you learn something new every day, guys.
2 queries. Okay.
Slow responses to requests for information. Let me
Okay.
quote from that. The request to extradite Julian Assange, restrictions on access to the media.
Yo, Crow,
at
what-
the southern
what-
border, limited help for.
What made you want to decide to sign up to be a part of a political poll? I'm just curious. Like, what? You're just like, I need my voice to be heard, or you're like, I want to know what questions they ask, or.
When I
I'm
spoke
just
with the
curious.
president
What
about
made
this
you
job,
decide
I mean,
that?
one of the things he conveyed to me very clearly was resetting the tone with the media was a big priority for him, and ensuring that there was a respect, even when there's a point of contention or a difficult conversation or back and forth, that is part of democracy. But our objective has been to reinstill normalcy and engagement with reporters, whether we agree or disagree, whether there is a partisan tilt to an outlet or not. And I think we have conducted ourselves accordingly. And always we're working to continue to
A partisan
be responsive.
tilt to an
I would
outlet?
say
What?
I would say 2 inquiries.
Every
of
outlet has a
probably
partisan tilt.
Tens of thousands, if not more.
It's called
does
a
not to
bias.
me
We
sound
all
like
have
a
it,
data point,
including
but I
me.
will look closer at the report. The other thing I would say is that the president has taken questions at about 250 occasions over the past year. If you average about 3 questions per time, that's about 700.
This administration is so insecure about how little questions Biden
the formal
gets.
press conference he did in March,
And how
press
accessible he
conferences
is
he's
compared to
done.
Trump.
That's about 3. So let's say 1,000, just to
I
be
swear he
generous there.
answers
That's
the
about 3 questions
questions.
a day. I think the American
That's
people
3
have seen
questions
him
a
out there
day.
answering questions. He will continue.
He gets
to
questions
be.
like,
That's an important
what
part
kind
of
of
his
ice cream do you
engagement
get?
with the press
He's
and the
very
public,
accessible.
and that will be a part of how we continue to conduct
You guys
ourselves.
and your
Go ahead, James.
mainstream ideas.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
I want to ask one
Thank
on
you.
the economy and one on the pandemic, if you don't mind.
Sure.
On the economy, in yesterday's briefing with Mr. Deese and in today's briefing, you
Oh,
have
this
both
guy.
cited,
He writes like a book before he
economic
asks
metrics,
the question.
that showed great progress across 2021, from the unemployment rate to job creation to a rise in real household income. And when citing the progress in those areas, both you and Mr. Deese attributed that progress to specific administration policies and legislative initiatives. Yet when it came to the highest inflation in 40 years, both you and Mr. Deese attributed this to a variety of external factors, from the pandemic to supply chain constraints to inaction by the Congress on Build Back Better. So, to be clear, for the American people in this midterm year who are going to be assessing the performance of the president and his party, where specifically inflation
It's
is
really
concerned,
interesting, Crowell.
does the
I like
buck
that.
stop with the president?
Well, I would say, James, first, that the president has spoken to the fact that costs for Americans and the squeeze it puts on Americans is a top concern for him. And I think
Sure
Brian
it
Deese
is.
also conveyed that yesterday.
Then open up the
And
pipeline
that's
if it's a
why,
top concern.
He put in place a supply chain task force.
Get rid of the
why we've
mandates. Open up the
prioritized
pipeline
taking
if it's such a
steps,
concern
including having
of
a port
Biden.
czar, including ensuring there are more truckers on the roads to ensure there are more goods moving and more goods on the shelves. And we've made a lot of progress in that regard. Of course, that's his responsibility and the responsibility of the economic team. I also think it's notable that if you go back to earlier this year, there were not the projections of the economic growth we have seen or the decrease in the unemployment rate we have seen. And that is in part, not just according to us, but many outside economists, to the bills that have passed, some of them bipartisan, and the work of this administration to get the economy up and going again and address COVID.
So your answer is yes, he owns the job creation, he owns the low unemployment rate, and he also owns inflation, correct?
I think any president should own everything happening in the country, and the president certainly sees it that way.
Yeah, right.
The president's remarks this morning included yet another exhortation to the unvaccinated population to get vaccinated. He has, since assuming office, made dozens and dozens, perhaps hundreds, of these kinds of appeals to that particular population.
Right.
Do you have any evidence? Indeed, do you have any sound basis for determining at all whether he is having any success in urging that population?
She's going to talk about
do as
the
he counsels?
80%.
We do. If you go back to December of 2020, just over 30%, maybe 35% of people in this country was open to getting vaccinated. Now we're at the point where more than 80% of the country has gotten at least one dose.
And then
what the
call it a
president
done
also
deal. Call it a
recognizes
W.
Is that
and
he's
then
not
go on.
always
But
the most
no, you
effective
want to
messenger.
keep pushing
Everybody
it
in
down
the
people's
country
throats.
is not looking for him to tell them what to do. He certainly knows that. What's most important here is for people hearing from local leaders, pediatricians in some cases, doctors, people who have different political beliefs out there, conveying clear, accurate information about the effectiveness of these vaccines. We think all of that has had an impact, and a lot of that is stuff that we've implemented.
How do we know that 35% of the American population was willing to get vaccinated a year ago?
I can give you the data. I'm happy to give that to you after the briefing.
You
It was a
don't know
public-
that.
Public
No.
poll. Go ahead.
You do.
Thank you, Jen. I have two questions.
It's a
one
great
on Haiti,
question.
the
You
other
don't.
one on Canada.
Sure.
The first one on Haiti. Yesterday was the 12th
If they
anniversary
own
of
it,
the
why would they
terrible
deflect
earthquake
it?
of 2010.
Exactly, Crow. They don't own
effects are
nothing.
still
No
being
politician.
felt
No
over there.
politician owns anything.
How has
Their
the,
point is to get
administration,
reelected.
or
That's it.
Has the administration followed up on the the migrants that were deported last fall back, the thousands of them that were deported over there?
What is that
Related to
accent?
the earthquake?
Related to the earthquake, but considering the situation over there, 12 years later, what kind of follow-up
Is that
has
French?
been done with the migrants that were sent back last
Time for a
Well,
cigarette?
we have
No?
a very
Okay.
large presence on the ground, a diplomatic presence on the ground in Haiti, and that has continued to be the case. We are also one of the largest, if not the largest, provider of humanitarian assistance
Like,
to Haiti
the
through
humanitarian
NGOs
assistance
and
we
many
just sent
outside
to
groups,
the Taliban.
in order
We
to
just sent Taliban like
provide
$400 million.
assistance for the range
No
of
big deal.
challenges that
We're
people in
rich.
Haiti have
It's
gone
not
through,
like we're
from
highly
earthquakes
inflated
or natural
currency,
disasters to
heavily in
obviously
debt
the challenge,
country
the
can just
challenge
do
of the
crap like that.
the assassination of their leader that happened this past summer. So we will continue to be providers of humanitarian assistance. Our diplomatic presence there is on the ground and working closely with trusted leaders in the region, in the country, and we remain committed to that.
Been the Americans on the ground, the officials on the ground, haven't been in contact with the Haitians who've been deported from Texas, for instance, last fall?
Well, I would say we have a diplomatic presence on the ground. That's
Are you talking
in
about
touch
the
with a
legal
range of
immigrants
Haitians
who were deported?
Either have been sent back or who need help and assistance.
Jeez.
And we work closely with local authorities to make sure that the humanitarian assistance is getting exactly to the people who need it.
Canada, Jen, I just want to check something with you. Considering
you're
the
Canadian.
multiple recent trade setbacks with the U.S., the conservative leader in Canada this week claimed that the U.S.-Canada relationship is at its lowest point in decades. How do you see this?
We don't see it that way. We
We
view
own
Canada
it.
as an important neighbor, an important partner, a country we are aligned on in many democratic values. We work with on a range of issues facing the global community, and that is certainly the view of our government here.
You don't feel a frustration towards, for instance, the fact that the Buy America measures are still imposed actually more strictly under this administration?
We are certainly familiar with the frustrations of some leaders who have been outspoken about it and spoke to it when they were here. And I would just reiterate that our objective here is to make electric vehicles specifically more accessible to Americans, to lower the cost here for Americans, and that is why the president pushed so hard for those provisions.
And
we
that's
see
why our
Canada
gas
continue to
prices
see
are
Canada as an
externally
important
high.
partner in the world. Go ahead.
Just on the president's first anniversary in office, what does he regard as his single most important achievement, and does he acknowledge
Getting elected,
that
probably.
any mistakes have been made, and if so, what's the biggest mistake?
Well, I would say first that the president is very proud of the progress we've made in getting 200 million Americans vaccinated, very proud of the work we have done to cut the childhood poverty by 40%, to help Americans who needed a little extra help get by through a challenging
with
economic
$1,200
time.
changed my life.
The work
Thank
we
you.
did to get a bipartisan infrastructure
Put a
bill
down
passed
payment on a
and
home.
to rebuild our place in the world.
I
There are many
started
others,
my
I think,
child's
confirming,
college tuition.
nominating and confirming historic judges across the board, ensuring that our administration up and down the ranks looks like America. And I could go on from there, fighting to take steps on climate in a historic manner that has been more than any administration in the past. In terms of what
we
look
feel
back,
it in our wallets
I'm
too,
not
Jen.
going to
Thank
speculate
you.
on that from here. I will let the president speak to that the next time you all see him.
Did he underestimate Donald Trump's continued grip on the Republican Party and how difficult that would make it to
His
work across
grip.
the aisle and unite the nation?
Donald
I will
Trump
tell
doesn't
you
have a
that,
grip.
Hearing Kevin McCarthy talk today, for
Go
an example,
Donald.
and
Go
seeing what he
Donald.
said on
Go
January
Donald.
21st
Go.
last year
Go.
is a pretty stark reminder of how much sway the former president has over members of his party. I think that's disappointing for everybody, not just people who work here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. I wanted to ask a question from some colleagues who couldn't be here.
Sure.
And then before I get to that, I wanted to follow up on a question that Justin asked.
Sure.
The president was in the Senate for 36 years.
Yeah.
We're at a point
Oh, I
where
love
the
your hair.
legislative
What are you
agenda
gonna
on Build
do?
Back Better and Voting Rights Act has hit major roadblocks. Is there some introspection that his approach to the Senate is not working, and are there changes that he's making to his approach to the
No,
Senate?
they don't like the laws.
Well, I would also point to his experience leading him to.
Has nothing to do with Biden. It has everything to do with the
bipartisan
law
infrastructure bill
that they want to
something
pass.
That many said could never happen, and when it was voted on, 19 Republicans voted for it. He leaned on his experience in the Senate to get that done. He leaned on his experience in the Senate to get the American Rescue Plan done and passed into law, and he will continue to lean on his experience in the Senate and as a former vice president to press for voting rights legislation, to press for Build Back Better, and getting those pieces of legislation done. So I would say, the successes we had in the past year and that he had, despite the fact that there was a slim margin, are actually, I guess I'm biased, but pretty impressive given the margin we had in the Senate and the challenges we had up against us.
Given that he's ending his first year underwater in the polls, more Americans disapprove of his job in office than approve of his job in office. What is he planning to do differently in approach to the job in the second year that shows that he's listening to that disapproval?
Well, I think what you see in most of these polls is a real frustration and exhaustion with COVID. And the fact that it is not over.
It's our wallets.
We
it's
share
COVID,
that. We understand that. People are fatigued across the country.
Inflation,
it's impacting how they live, how they
gas
work.
prices.
Their worries about their kids, their ability to
listening
experience
to him
joyful
talk.
things in life like concerts and going to restaurants and seeing friends. We understand that. The president knows that the most important step he can take is to continue to fight to get the pandemic under control and also to lower costs for Americans across the country. So I would say it's a continuation
by
of
shutting
the
down
fights
pipelines
that he built a great deal of a base for over the course of the last year.
The president doesn't think that the disapproval rates are a reflection of the way he's approached the job.
Again, I would point you to what most data shows you, which is a frustration about COVID and prices, and he believes, and he's believed from the beginning that addressing
you don't
COVID
believe that.
are
I don't
number
believe
two,
that.
1, 2, 3, 4
She doesn't believe
issues,
that,
and,
but she's
continues
trying
to
to
be the
spin
case
it
today.
as best as she can.
Colleagues couldn't be here. Do Biden and Putin have plans to meet in the future?
I don't have anything to predict for you on that front. As Jake mentioned, we're just, of course, concluding the third round of talks.
I'm sure
people are going to
Biden
go back to their
does not
capitals.
wanna
They're
meet
going
with
to
Putin
discuss
again.
and assess and see where things stand. So
Why would you?
in terms of next steps, we'll have to see. We'll know more over the coming days.
Is there a deadline for Moscow to de-escalate in Ukraine?
Again, I'm not going to set any deadlines here. Ultimately, the choice is really up to them. Are they going to proceed in invading Ukraine? If so, there are going to be severe consequences and economic impacts that will be devastating to the economy. They're far beyond what happened in 2014. If that's a choice they want to make and they think that's to their advantage, that's a choice. They only have the power to make that. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks guys for joining me. I appreciate you guys so much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Crowd, thanks for hanging out with me. Brandon, and Tuckett. Thanks for hanging out with me. It means a lot to me. Share this. Put it on every social media platform. I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you want to support me, you go to buymeacoffee.com/DerekOshesha. The link is in the description below. It would mean a lot to me. Support me. It helps pay for server fees and stuff like that I have to do to put my podcast up. And gives a little incentive to help make this podcast even better. Also, just remember that Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, going live, having a live show with a guest. It's going to be an every Sunday thing. So come out, hang out, check it out as we get ready for the entering the week. Yeah, I appreciate you guys so much for joining me. It means a lot to me. I love you so much. Again, tell your friends and family about the Derek O'Shea Show. I appreciate you. Goodbye.